G'day, all two ordinary cops. We're back again. Schultzy, how are you, mate?
Yeah, mate, not too bad. Mate, yeah, cruising along here in Brisbane. Mate, I believe you caught up with, I suppose, one of our semi-sponsors
Yeah.
with the sauce last night. Hey, mate, just give us a bit of a rundown how that went.
Yeah, so last night in Mackay, caught up with Big Camo from Big Camo Sauce. He's been slinging us a whole heap of sauce to check out and sort of hand around. At the Goanna Brewery, mate, he's in town's got a brewery there. It was a fantastic night, and I had too many, but it was good. We had a good catch up. So, shout out to Camo and Naya from the Goanna Brewery in Mackay. That was a great night out. So, I'm now in Cairns, mate. I need to think about where I am. I can't remember. So, I've gone from Lithgow to Mackay via Sydney, Brisbane, and now I'm in Cairns. So, I'm going to Uluru via Cairns. So, it's all
Yep.
happening. Yeah. So
And
it's
then
been
you
good.
did the milk run up to Cairns too.
Did the milk run, so spent half an hour on the ground in Townsville, and yeah, we're just cruising around Queensland at the moment, about to head back to the territory, so it should be good.
Yeah, yeah, bloody oath,
Yeah.
mate. Back in your home country. Well, not
Mm.
really home country, but policing country anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yeah. So what do we got on, mate? What's on today?
Well, mate, first of all, we're just going to, especially a couple of our comments in relation to about the police hard stop, and mate, as always, you get the idiots on there just making stupid comments. We're not even going to read them out because they're just not even worth it. But mate, I just thought we'd just touch on it briefly because as a police officer, you got to have that resilience to be able to cop that sort of stuff. And there's people that talk about this that have no idea about what goes on. They've got no life experience or no experience within that realm, and they just shoot shit. And this is for anybody on social media. Mate, social media it gives people a platform to talk. However, for all those people commenting, you guys haven't produced a podcast like we have.
Yeah.
So, with close to, mate, we're almost 200,000 downloads. So,
Yeah.
like we give a shit.
Yeah,
But, mate, you want to make
that's the thing.
any comment on that?
Oh, not really. It's the comment come through, skim straight over them. It's you're irrelevant, and that's it. It's just don't care. Move on. It's
Yeah.
just yeah. So anyway, I think that's just our opinion on any sort of comments. Don't worry about words. Words don't hurt. Move on. You don't have to be friends with
Yeah,
everybody.
well, that's right.
No.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's right. And being a police officer is not about being friends with everybody. You do have your close knit and all that sort of thing, and you are friendly to people. However, you always judge people, and always kind of correct if you think something's wrong. Don't be afraid to question it because that's what we do. We investigate.
No,
So
it was the old standard. I can't remember his full name. There was an old chief of the army quite a few years ago now, who came out with the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, and that was the thing. We quite often we had to engage. There was no, we'll just let them keep all this antisocial behaviour and the peeing in public. That was at the lower end. But yeah, you don't accept it. You have to engage, and that's just how it is. And you're going to get abused when you do that. And guess what? No one cares.
yep,
So you get the last word, I get the last action. Simple as that.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Mate, actually, just a quick one. I'm not sure we haven't actually spoken about this, but Bart sent through a video the other day of a big fire in Toowoomba. The YMCA got
Yeah,
burned
the
down.
PCYC. Yeah, the PC. I know it
Yeah,
well. I used to go. I did after school there in the early '90s. When Mum was first started working, us kids went across from Darling Heights in Toowoomba, and yeah, we used to go to the after school care at the PCYC. So I do know it. That was a bit sad. That's a bit of an iconic old building. That.
well,
Um,
mate, yeah. I mean, you and I both. He sent it through, and he said, "I think both of you will appreciate this." And mate, I used to actually do a bit of boxing, in there.
mm,
So yeah, it was a great place. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, and I believe they got a perp in custody for
yeah,
allegedly
I saw
lighting.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, a bit sad the old PCYC in Toowoomba, but yeah, that happens, I suppose.
well,
Mm,
hopefully they'll rebuild it, mate, or get some grant, or who knows.
yeah,
But yeah, no,
yep,
I think it was yeah, it's a bit of history for Toowoomba, and I think it'd be very important to
mm,
have something like that continue going on in the future. So
yeah, yep.
yeah.
What are we on to, mate?
Well, mate, we're going to talk about Kava, and this is basically it comes up because I went on another podcast, Once Upon a Real Life, with a friend of mine, Belle, when she started up. I think I was a second speaker or something. And mate, there was I was talking about Kava, and where I was at in Ramangini, Kava was prevalent. Like, it was just everywhere. I used to make the joke that the Kava dog would just drag its ass on the ground as soon as it landed in Ramangini, because, and look, going back, this is it was introduced by the missionaries, basically back in the days of substitute for alcohol. And the reason we're talking about it, because there was so many derogatory comments, especially directed at me, which I don't really give a shit about. But it's about people's misinformation. So I thought it's important that we actually just get some of the truths out there about what Kava is. And for anybody listening and anybody wanting to comment, because they said, oh, it's probably better than alcohol, you got to remember these places are dry from alcohol as well. So alcohol's not allowed out there, Kava's not allowed out there, and there's a good reason Kava's not allowed out there, mate. But you and I probably did quite a bit in relation to Kava seizures, and we'll put a photo up. I think it's you and I in 2009 in Catherine, where we seized, and from memory, it was about 140 kilos of Kava. Now, what you got to understand is Kava, I think you can buy it for about a cent a gram, but it's $1 a gram in territory, and that was back then. So we're going, back 15 years or so, 16, 17 years. So when you're talking about that, that's like couple of 100,000. So, 140,000, say, back then. Now it's probably way more. And the thing is, what you've got to understand is, yes, it's traditional, over in Tonga, Papua New Guinea, any of those, Fiji, it's quite big, and it's quite ceremonial. But when the problem is, in those sort of locations, it just gets abused. And like anything, whether it's alcohol, whether it's Kava, it's just dangerous and unhealthy. And so the government has to put stops on things to try and prevent, people's health going down the hill. But, mate, do you want to start off and talk about some of your memories, I suppose, or recollections of the truths about Kava?
Yeah, so the big thing with Kava is obviously, like you said, it's used overseas in ceremony, and there's a bit of a custom around it. It's not something that people sit there and drink all day. It's just not the way it's used at all. The trouble is, up in the top end, it is. That's how people have Kava, they will drink it all day. People say it's not as bad as alcohol. It's different from alcohol. I wouldn't say it's better or worse, but it's certainly different. I also want to say that all those laws were brought in place after speaking with elders. Elders are the ones who petitioned the government to bring those laws in up there because of the absolute destruction that was going on in the communities. So the Kava, where alcohol does cause a lot of antisocial behaviour and violence, domestic violence, child abuse, all the rest of it, and lots of just violence in general, drunken violence. One thing I found with Kava was it causes a hell of a lot of neglect. People will neglect themselves. They won't eat for days. They'll just drink Kava and lie in a stupor, basically, just completely off their head on Kava. Really bad for their organs, bad for their skin. They get the turtle skin. But the really sad thing that I saw in relation to Kava was actually in Maningrida, so just north of Ramangini. And that was kids who basically roam the streets raised by camp dogs. For little kids, toddlers, who don't really have a house to go to because mum and dad drink Kava all day and they don't look after them at all. These little kids run around naked, wild-eyed, sort of eating whatever and just surrounded by a big pack of camp dogs. So that's why the Kava was bad. It causes this raging neglect. And then you can go on to the side of the organised crime side of it, for want of a better term, but it is organised crime. And it was mostly run by Tongans, they were Tongan people who were coming up and delivering it from Sydney. They were bringing it all the way up in either vehicles or flying up with it or whatever they were doing, and then delivering it out to these communities at an absolutely enormous profit. So it was gouging the community of massive amounts of money, but it was more that neglect and that health problems down the track that were really the major concern with Kava. So that's why it was enforced.
Yeah. Mate, and look, also over the time, people got to understand, we saw I suppose, a change in how it was delivered up there and sold. Back when we first started, it was a lot of the Tongans actually bringing it in. they would get up there and we'd catch them like that. 2009 is a perfect example, 140 kilos. The problem is they were going to court and just getting a fine, and their fine was nothing compared to what they were making out of it. When you consider that, that 140, that's $140,000. They were probably getting a $10,000 fine. Like, they give a shit.
Yeah.
The thing is, after a while, they started to get a bit of criminal history, so we could actually build on that. And then they transitioned into getting Aboriginal people to actually take it out there and all that, so they were getting busted. So it's not only the health effects, but they were getting other people. And look, some of them I knew. I had one guy come in, especially when I was at Ramangini, and he came in and he goes, "I've got a report for bail." And I said, "What for?" Like, he was really good, big supporter of the police and all that sort of thing. He said, "I bought Kava up," and I gave him a dressing down. I said, "Mate, you realise they're doing it to supplement their massive income. You get nothing out of this, and they're just using you to make money." So it's not only the health effects that's damaging. It's also the fact that some of these Aboriginal, and they were great people, just getting basically influenced in by some of the Tongans. And this is nothing against Tongans. There's a small group that were doing it.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah,
It just so happened that it was almost exclusively Tongans at the time that were bringing it in, and that's how it is. Not every Tongan who was up there was doing it at all, but it was. People were like, "Oh, it wasn't just us," and there was all kinds of threats coming out of Sydney from the Tongan community. It's like, no. But the facts were that the people who brought that up were Tongan. It's simple as that. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And and then of course they changed a little bit. They even had some different nationalities. I think I remember one, and I'll mention his name. I was working with Kenny Bradshaw at the time. And I can't remember where she was from, some European country, but just to try and fund some of the stuff that she was doing travelling around Australia. And she had a car, and it was only because under the Kava Act you could seize the car if it was used for transport of Kava. And so they were losing cars, and then they adjusted and changed and started hiring vehicles.
Yeah.
And this is it's so when you talk about organised crime, that's how it happens. It just keeps on evolving to try and keep the law out of it, or trying to make it as profitable as possible. So I think. And look, one of the things I did mention in that podcast, and I'm slightly incorrect, although I think a lot of it did go back into quite well-established places in Tonga, but I said mansions back in Tonga, but you corrected me and said it was mansions in Sydney. So, yeah, do you want to add a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, just some of the information we were getting in substance abuse was that a lot of the people who were in charge of this were running it from Sydney, and they were living the life of Larry. They were making a fortune. They were making huge profits on the Kava that they were delivering up to the Northern Territory. And as a result, they were living in mansions, and that mansions were in Sydney. They just weren't in Tonga that we were aware of. But that was lots of that going back into there. So, it was an organised crime network. Admittedly, the substance was Kava, which is legal elsewhere, but abused very heavily in the Territory. So I think that's the takeaway there. But I mean, talking about Kava, the illicit tobacco trade, it's basically, American organised crime in the 1920s was born out of prohibition, because people are going to drink. If you say they can't drink, they will find a way to drink. And what happens is people who would never be criminals want to have a drink, and they now have to interact with organised crime, because organised crime will just provide the product. Illicit tobacco is exactly that. The government has made normal tobacco almost untenable because it's so expensive, purely down to taxes, government taxes, and on top of the price of it, which is enormous. And as a result, organised crime just came out with a solution. We said, well, we've got massive supply for nowhere near that much. We'll just flood the joint with illegal tobacco. There'll be so much of it. Everyone who smokes will just come and start buying illegal tobacco, and the government is now irrelevant. And that's what happened. And now it's sort of like, well, why don't you just backtrack so you remove the need for people to have contact with organised crime, and just people are going to smoke. If people want to smoke, they're going to smoke. They're going to find a way to do it. Sure, you can still have your health. Everyone knows smoking is no good for you. Well, I don't. I smoked for a long time, and I hate it now. But people who smoke are going to find it. They're going to track it down and find it. And if it's illegal, or it's not illegal, if it's untenable to do it legally, they will do it illegally. And once
Yep.
again, you get people who aren't criminals in contact with the criminal world. And it's the same argument I had for cannabis. I used to say that I could legalise cannabis with the smallest amendment to the Tobacco Control Act in the Northern Territory. You just change the definition of tobacco or tobacco-based product to include cannabis, and then you remove it from the Schedule 2 of the misuse of drugs regulations, and you've done it. So,
Yep.
yeah, and to me it was almost like, you know what, the harm minimisation of cannabis is more removing people from the contact with organised crime. That to me was the harm minimisation benefit of it. Because yeah, if
Yeah.
people want to have a chuff, they're going to have a chuff. It's already illegal, and God, it's massively consumed all over the country. So yeah,
It is, yeah.
we all know that.
Mate, yeah. And like, mate, yeah, I mean, we've got plenty of stories, especially even out in the Aboriginal communities where cannabis was just huge, and you could see. I mean, over the years, I think a deal bag out there was about $50, and then a deal bag at that time was about a gram, and then of course, because we keep on getting seizures and all that sort of thing, we years down the track, it ended up being half a gram for the same price.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a lot more than
we
50. It was like 100, $150, $200 for a deal bag. It was huge amounts of money for a
it
gram.
was, yeah.
Yeah, a gram or less of cannabis. So
Yeah, because they're going to consume it regardless, and it was always a bit of a to and fro. I mean, we stopped as much as possible, but we know about the incidence of like cannabis if they don't get it in those communities. You can have some really I suppose upheaval up there
yeah,
and some crime committed because of it. And look, we got a serious one, and mate, I don't know whether you want to talk about it, but you can probably mention a bit about the Managreta incident where where basically the cannabis shipment didn't come in, and
yeah.
end up getting a police officer seriously injured.
Yeah, yeah. So I won't mention his name. I haven't asked him to talk about it, but that was one of the first big jobs I did in criminal investigation. I was the officer in charge of the investigation, but what had happened was the Substance Abuse Intelligence Desk had gone out into Arnhem Land and done really successful road blocks and things like that, and seized a lot of cannabis. Um, and as a result, the supply dried up in Maningrida for a day or two, like for quite a bit of time, and everyone was doing what we used to call stressing for gunja. So people haven't got gunja, so they start stressing for gunja. They need it. They need to get their gunja. And people start doing really wild stuff. So what had happened was this young bloke had come into the police station and followed the female member at the front and gone, yeah, just wait here for a sec. He'd come in and wasn't making a lot of sense. So she was a relief member and the other member was a relief member as well, as in they'd come out relieving from Darwin. And she walked back into the police station to check something with him. This guy isn't quite right. You want to come out or something similar. And as she did, the fellow actually followed her, not to her knowledge, followed her into the room. And as he came into the muster room, where it's sort of that's police only. People do come in there, but it's sort of the police only area. So as he came into that room, the copper was sitting at the table, and he's pulled a knife out. This fellow who's come into the station, and actually gone to stab the cop right in the chest. He had his. It's weird. It's like a story. He had his badge. It was back in the khaki days. His leather badge with the metal badge inside it. So his leather wallet with the metal badge was in his top pocket, and the knife actually plunged into that, which stopped it going into his chest. He's then realised, the copper realised what's going on and has pushed back a bit, and the offender then pulled back and stabbed again and got him in the arm, and he actually opened him up from just above his elbow across his elbow joint to below his elbow. It was completely cut wide open. The scene was terrible because it was blood all through a muster room, and the muster room's a sacred area for coppers. That's where you're completely safe. Out on the street, you're not safe. In there, you're safe. So our crime scene was the police station, which had never happened to us. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a hell of a job. But once again, that was stressing for gunja.
Yep. And that's some of the repercussions that can happen when people are addicted to stuff. And as you were talking about earlier, I mean, if you want to talk about the amount of cannabis getting out into these remote locations, I know when I was working with said, we did an operation up in Darwin where we were checking every flight going to remote stations out in Arnhem Land, basically. And mate, in 5 days we seized over a kilo of cannabis. Now
Mm.
you imagine a kilo, okay, that's 1,000 grams.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
thousand grams at $50 a gram. That's
Oh,
a
yeah.
fair bit of bloody money.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot
Yeah.
of money. Yeah, and that's the thing that the dealers were making big money. There's motivation there because you're going to make good profits, and
Mm.
that's why it was happening. So it's all supply and demand. It's like every other product. If people want to buy it and you've got it and you're going to sell it, you're going to make money. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Groot Island. We were in the said team, so Substance Abuse Intelligence Desk, and we'd flown out to Groot and done a couple of warrants. Nothing. The old bush telegraph out there was pretty good. They said, them police with dogs are here, you mob. And we drove straight from the airport straight to our first search warrant and just executed the warrant straight away. We didn't even go to the police station. And the dog ran in and was having an absolute, doing backflips. It was so happy. It had found so much weed. It was funny. But there was no weed there. It was just the smell. And what had happened, this young bloke had grabbed it and run out in the bush and got rid of it. And we couldn't find it. And there was nothing in the house. And then for the next 2 or 3 days, I think we got the odd gram bag here and there. We basically got nothing because they'd hidden it so well and got rid of it. But what did start to happen on the day 3 was the local coppers are going, you blokes need to bugger off. The domestics are going through the roof. There's real problems starting to kick off in the community because everyone's starting to stress for ganja because there's none about. And we often laughed that the Air North flight that came in after we took off in Air Wing would have been laden with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and they're the flights. It was either them or I mean, it wasn't really charter. It was more the organised flights that used to go out there regularly. And
Yeah.
whether it was alcohol or cannabis or Kava, a
Yep.
lot of them came out on that. Kava probably not so much because there's so much weight involved.
It's too
Um,
heavy.
yeah, but definitely cannabis, alcohol as well.
Yeah.
And you got some. I think Millingimby was one for me because, of course, Ramangini was a permanent station. Millingimby had a satellite station, so there wasn't police out there all the time.
Yeah.
So when we went over there, we made sure that we checked the flights, coming in because they had free reign. Basically, you
Yeah.
jump on a flight in Darwin, you can land in bloody Millingimby with as much shit as you want and
Yeah.
and sell it.
No one to greet you.
Yeah, that's right. And look, this is some of the organised crime as well. I know Elko Island. There was back in 2010, I think it was. They were so that what they were actually very organised. We got this information in relation to a family conflict. So they came in and reported this the amount of ganja was getting out there, or cannabis, for those people who don't understand what ganja is. And it was actually getting transported in through Millingimby, then out to Elko Island.
Yeah.
And it was very well organised.
Yeah. Yep.
So, these people were almost basically getting the money before the shipment came in and paying the person as they came off the plane, and then they jump back on the plane and do a return flight. So
Yeah.
this is all sort of stuff, and what you've got to understand is when you work out in these communities, you've got to be on the lookout, and you've also got to understand the repercussions of stopping, too much because, it's just like you said, it creates domestics, creates family problems, all that sort of stuff. But too much of it gets in, and you get the same problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that's why it was an ongoing battle. But yeah,
Yeah,
that sort of covers off a bit on that. That's explained Kava pretty well and sort of spoken about just the unique nature of what goes on up there because it's not really like anywhere else. There's substance abuse everywhere in the country, but it's a whole new level up there. Like it's
yeah,
just all that happens. Like with the people involved in it, the poor buggers. It's all they do. They just consume whatever their product is, and it might even be a combination of their products. And they just live for that, and it's just a cycle of addiction and not a lot of purpose, not a lot of employment. I'm not making
no,
excuses. That's probably the cause of it. Um,
yeah,
and then there's a lot of profit in it for those who want to sell it. So it's just that cycle. Uh,
exactly.
yeah,
Mate, and look, you've got to understand it's more that East Arnhem area
yeah,
that's because it was brought in by the missionaries. I can't actually recall ever seeing it like down in the desert, down in
no,
Largemona or anywhere like that was never, never even like not even a gram would have gone out there. I don't think.
No.
Somebody coming from that area was visiting family or something, but we never saw it. And look, mate, I will actually give a bit of a story, and I'll mention it was, and I'll mention him, Ray Musgrave. He was over at Gapawiak at the time, so he was very, mate. Like I said, if the police force actually gave him a car and just said chase drugs, he would just do it for the rest of his career. He just lived it, and yeah, we got this information that some Kava was coming in, and yeah, and and this is back in the times when they were actually getting the local Indigenous community to bring it in, and we knew him pretty well. And anyway, luckily we got enough information, but they'd hidden him out bush in some of the floodplains, and he took us out there, and we caught the guy. It was a Tongan, and he was out there, and he'd been out there for 2.5 days, and we got him with $55,000. So yeah, that's just the way. Yeah, that's just the way it rolls.
So he was the money man, just hanging out in the bush.
Yep, that's right. And it was just through our connections and with the community and all that got us the result. But yeah, and that's like I said. I know that year I think we seized in cash about $250,000, but we're only scratching the surface. It's nothing compared to what was going in. And
it was big money.
Yeah, so yeah, mate. But I think that's probably pretty much it from Kava. And just to correct me, it was more mentions in Sydney, not so much in Tonga. But I know there was some money going back into Tonga. But I think majority of it was people, like you said, Tongans, these small cohort, I would say, of criminals that were living in Sydney and living it up, and just like money hand over fist. So. Mate, I don't know whether you remember. I remember taking a few of them up in the early days up to Darwin, prisoner transport, and just heaps of money on it. They always had money on it.
Yeah, very true, mate. But before we go, look, something really serious matter that we need to talk about before I go.
Well, there is a very serious matter.
Very serious.
Do you want to kick it off?
Yeah. So very, very serious, very sad. We have a carton of the week. So the carton, I'm issuing it to myself because last night at the Goanna Brewery, I overindulged ridiculously. I couldn't remember talking to you. I couldn't remember talking to my wife and kids. My wife this morning seemed to know all my stories already. I'm like, how do you know? She said, you idiot. You told me all this last night and you wouldn't get off the bloody phone, and I was trying to get to sleep, and you and the kids were just blah, 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 and I was exhausted and said, screw you. But having a laugh. But and the other thing is, bloody Big Camo wouldn't let me pay for a single drink all night. So the whole thing cost me nothing. So as a result, I'm issuing the carton of the week, to myself. And thanks very much to the boys at Goanna Brewery and to Big Camo Sauce at Serena. So good on him.
Yeah. Mate, that is outstanding, I should say. And mate, that's definitely a carton.
Yeah. The only thing that was missing, mate, was you. You would have had a bloody good time.
Yeah, but then I would have had to pay a carton, I'm sure.
Oh, definitely. Oh, God, yeah. You would have got your slur on, mate. Don't worry about that. Yeah. Well, that'll probably do us. We'll wrap it up. We've got a few more interviews coming in the next few weeks, so that's good to see.
What we do,
a couple other little surprises as well.
Yeah, mate. Yes, we've definitely got some really big stuff lined up, especially even in the next month or two. So yeah, that's going to be quite exciting. We won't mention them yet, but yeah, you'll definitely hear about it. I think there's one like just about within a month. So. And then basically a month after that, we've got another event. So that should be that should be pretty good. So we're looking forward to it. It's we're basically 2 years now in this podcast, and it's really coming together. Thank you to all the listeners. When we hit the 200,000, you'll see it. It's very, very close. I think we're 199 at the moment. So
wow. And keep the comments coming in. Anything you want us to talk about, let us know. And yeah, we do read most of them. Chilty goes through them also. Yeah, flick through an email or however you need to do it. But yeah, too easy. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, mate. Yes, for sure. So this is Touring Cops, and look, for everybody listening, we've actually recorded this half an hour before we're about to release it. So due to internet issues earlier on,
Yeah, the straight off the plane in Cairns and straight on the old computer. So yeah, no jobs there. All
that's
good.
how dedicated he is.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah, very good.
All right.
Talk to you
All
next
right.
week.
Yep, will do. We'll catch you then.